Italy's Ministry of Culture recently announced that an 8-kilogram chunk of obsidian has been recovered from a Neolithic shipwreck first discovered off the coast of Capri earlier in the year. Obsidian was a very useful tool in ancient times and has been found at many Mediterranean sites that do not have any natural sources of it. This, together with the existence of this shipwreck carrying an obsidian core, as well as various other evidence gathered over the years, shows that trade and seafaring were both taking place in the Neolithic. In this video, I discuss this find along with some other interesting facts about this part of Italy 5,000 years ago. A police diving team earlier this year found the remains of a Neolithic shipwreck off the coast of Capri in Italy. They announced the discovery in October but didn't reveal the exact location because they need to protect it from looters. As with most ancient shipwreckages made of wood, the actual craft did not survive. However, archaeologists were able to identify the site as a shipwreck due to other artifacts observed there. On 20th of November, the Naples Police Underwater Unit found the obsidian core whilst diving at the site, which sits at a depth of between 30 and 40 meters. The obsidian core weighs around 8 kilograms and has chiseling marks on its surface. It's thought it was probably used to make sharp tools. This is the first artifact to be lifted from the shipwreck site, and it's now in storage in Naples, where it will be cleaned and examined. Obsidian is an igneous rock that forms when lava erupts from a volcano and cools rapidly, creating a natural glass that's rich in silica. At this point, it's not clear where the obsidian core found in the shipwreck came from. However, there are several sources of it in the Mediterranean. These are Palmarola near Naples, Pantelleria and Lipari near Sicily and Sardinia. Many Neolithic obsidian tools have also been found in Malta, which shows that it was connected to the broader Mediterranean at the time. Interestingly, Malta's megalithic culture, often referred to as the Temple people, was quite unique in many ways, which implies a certain amount of isolation, but its exploitation of overseas obsidian sources shows it wasn't completely secluded. A maritime archaeologist, Sean Kingsley, who was not involved in the discovery of the shipwreck, pointed out in an article in Live Science that the obsidian may have been for trade, but could also have been for creating ritual objects. He references the Grotta della Felci on Capri, where such objects dating to the Neolithic have been found in the past. In addition to obsidian objects, clay vessels have been discovered there, along with animal and human bones. Archaeologists think this particular cave was used for cultic ceremonies, which included drinking and eating from special containers. Interestingly, the prehistoric heritage of Capri was first noticed by the Romans. The Roman historian Suetonius wrote that when Augustus was having a villa built on Capri, giant bones of sea creatures and stone weapons were found while the foundations were being dug. Augustus was so fascinated by these finds that he had them put on display in his sea palace. When a modern-day excavation was undertaken at the villa, archaeologists found some of these artifacts and dated the items of human provenance to the Neolithic and Bronze Age. Kingsley also refers to one piece of evidence that proves the Neolithic inhabitants of Italy were capable of traversing water: the La Marmotta site near Rome. I discussed this particular site in a video which I'll link below. At this submerged Neolithic village under Lake Bracciano, archaeologists found well-preserved wooden canoes that date back to between 5690 and 5250 BCE. As I said in my video on it, these are the only wooden canoes dating to the Neolithic to have been found in the Mediterranean. At the same site, many textile fragments were also found, which makes it an important place for studying the ancient past, because wood and textile artifacts rarely survive so long, and therefore our ability to get a full picture of Neolithic societies is hindered. Most of Italy isn't really known for megaliths. Evidence of Neolithic human habitation mostly comes from caves or the remains of open-air villages. That's not to say it doesn't have megaliths. There are dolmens, menhirs, rock-cut tombs, and a few interesting structures that may or may not be natural and may or may not be Neolithic. Argimusco in Sicily is often referred to as the Stonehenge of Sicily, but I personally think it's totally natural. However, overall, Italy isn't known for having had megalithic building groups in the Neolithic except for on Sardinia. On Sardinia during the Neolithic, thousands of elaborate burial tombs were carved called domus de Janus. Many menhirs were erected all over the island, and various other megalithic structures were built which still survive to this day. Also in the central Mediterranean, Malta had a very rich megalithic building culture. It's thought that the people who built its temples originated in Sicily or Calabria due to similarities in pottery styles, but the megalith building activity was something that evolved only in Malta, rather than being a concept that was transported from place to place. This is something I find quite baffling. Why were megalithic cultures in some places and not in others? Was there a relationship between those that practiced cult rituals in caves and those that carried out elaborate ceremonies in purpose-built monuments? Also, was there any connection between the megalith builders of the Atlantic coast, those of Scotland, those of Sardinia, and those of Malta, to name just a few? They all had similarities, but also vast differences in cultural expression, especially Malta, which was in many ways unique. I find this diagram pretty helpful when trying to compare ancient cultures and timelines. This is taken from a 2021 paper titled Radiocarbon Dated Trends and Central Mediterranean Prehistory in the Journal of World Prehistory. If we look at the late Neolithic around 5,500 years ago, this is when megalithic cultures were first emerging in the central Mediterranean. They appeared in southeastern France, in Corsica, in Sardinia, and in Malta. However, the cultures referred to here in other parts of the central Mediterranean were not megalith builders. Also, it's worth mentioning that the megalithic cultures of the central Mediterranean were not as ancient as those on the Atlantic coast in Portugal and France. There's at least 1,000 years between them, if not more, so it's not prudent to lump all megaliths into one basket, so to speak. Even stranger, those in Turkey predate those on the Atlantic coast of Europe by around 5,000 years, and there doesn't seem to be anything in between those dates. As a non-academic researcher, I can play around with this information, synthesize data from different disciplines, and have a stab at working out what was going on back then. So that's what I'm doing. In fact, I think to really understand megalithic timelines and relationships between the cultures, we need to know what the motivations of the megalith builders were. Recently, I did come up with an idea on this based on various medical issues I've had this year, which I won't go into here. I've been meaning to do a video on Patreon about that idea though. Please excuse that it won't be a fully researched piece. It's going to be more of a word salad, brain dump type of thing. However, this general approach to the megalithic dilemma is in the background to two main pieces of research that I'm working on books about. One is about the Cyclopean walls in Italy, and the other is about cart ruts. I think I can solve the whole question of whether the Cyclopean walls are Roman or not. Cart ruts are a little bit more tricky, but I'm working on a hypothesis. Aliens aren't involved, although maybe they should be, given that they seem to be in the news quite a bit lately. If it was them, I apologise in advance for not giving credit where credit's due. Anyway, I've gone off on a tangent, but my point is that obsidian being carried on a boat might seem quite a boring subject in many ways. However, the very fact that Neolithic cultures were travelling across the sea to obtain natural resources shows a certain level of sophistication and also a possible connection to other people for trade. If the temple people on Malta were travelling to Pantelleria, which is the nearest source of obsidian, then they must have had a peaceful relationship with the Neolithic inhabitants of that island. Pantelleria was inhabited during the Neolithic, and neither Pantelleria or Malta have defensive structures or obvious weaponry from that time period. So then it makes me wonder how much they exchanged ideas. Did they visit one another more regularly? There are always more questions than answers in my videos, but they are important questions to ask. Incidentally, while we're on the subject, it was off the coast of Pantelleria that a huge monolith thought to be man-made was found, but dating to 10,000 years ago based on sea level rise. I'll put a link to the video I did on that below. Could that monolith be a missing link in the megalithic timeline? Maybe, but it still doesn't explain why megaliths aren't more widespread in the area, such as on Sicily, for example. They can't all be under the sea. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed that. There are two ways to make offerings to the algorithm gods. One, hit the like button, and two, get in that comment section. Thank you to my patrons, channel members, and super chatters, and I'll see you next time.